Drip. A low groan escaped the figure lying down on the table as the droplet of water landed on his forehead. Drip. Where am I? He still had his eyes closed, but he could still feel the metal shackles wrapped around his wrists, ankles, and last his neck. The dripping reminded him of the Kyuubi's cage, but the stench in this place was overpowering. Kyuubi's cage had always had a little of Naruto's smell mixed with that of a fox's den, but here it smelled of blood and death. Drip. Another low groan escaped him before he spoke again. Any idea what happened Baka for Ball? You got caught, Kyuubi responded sarcastically. Ever since Naruto's wound at the Valley of the End with Sasuke, Kyuubi has been able to speak to Naruto through his mind. At first, waking up in the hospital, this was a big surprise. The seal had been weakened from the extreme use of chakra and the wounds he had taken, but luckily the seal didn't continue to weaken. The two had grown to one another, though they would never admit it, and had become rather close over the years. Well, no shit. Remember what happened? You wore all our chakra out sparing with that girl you are so infatuated with. I am not. Kyuubi mentally rolled his eyes at the boy. Anyway, you two were attacked and you jumped in the way of blast for the girl with the white eyes. Lavender. Her eyes are pale lavender, and you know her name is Hinata. The two had been training partners for a while now. After Naruto caught her training early one morning and decided to train alongside of her. Since then, the both of them had just been meeting at the same spot every morning. Thank you. Huh? Naruto was confused. For what? For proving my point, you obviously want her. Just claim her and mate her. If Naruto would have been drinking something at that moment, it would have sprayed across everywhere in front of him. It was true that he had fallen for the Hyuga heiress, but he believed she could never love him. Dumbass perverted fox, just tell me what happened. She was knocked unconscious and you jumped in the way of a blast coming at her. You were knocked out immediately afterwards and I believe they left her there, still alive. How do you know? Just because you were knocked out by such a pathetic attack doesn't mean I was. I could still sense things outside your body and I didn't have her scent as we traveled. Who attacked us anyway? Before Kyuubi could answer him, Naruto heard the door to the chamber he was in open. Naruto opened his eyes and for the first time took in his surroundings. He was in a square room. The walls seemed to have blood scattered on the wall. Around him were tables full of ancient-looking jutsu books and medical instruments. He was in the center of the room on a large metal table. Metal shackles on his arms and legs had him pinned down, and a metal collar around his neck had a chain going through the back of the table that held his head down. Naruto's eyes immediately glared when his eyes took in the figure smiling at him from the door. The man's glasses glinted in the light and his silver hair was longer than what Naruto remembered. The young trader whose healing skills were only beaten by Tsunade herself, fighting skill near that of the Jounins of Konoha, and an overall asshole. Kabuto, Naruto snarled. My Naruto-kun, how are you feeling? Kabuto said smiling as he walked into the room over to one of the tables next to Naruto. Oh, just dandy Kabuto. Tell me, just how far have you managed to shove your head up Orochimaru's ass over the years? Naruto spoke, still glaring into Kabuto's eyes. Still the comedian I see. Unfazed by Naruto's speaking, he leaned over Naruto's face. I wonder, how far have you gotten with that little Hyuga girl? Naruto immediately struggled against the chains he strapped into, trying his hardest to rip into Kabuto. His eyes flicked red a little. I wonder if she survived? Kabuto continued, still smiling. If she didn't, I guarantee you will regret it. Naruto snarled. Oh? I wonder if you will be so uppity after Orochimaru-sama's little experiment. Kabuto had a smile on his face as Naruto's look changed from anger to a little worry. What are you going to do? Naruto questioned. Oh, that is all up to Orochimaru-sama. I don't think it will be pleasant, considering how you saved your precious Sasuke from him months ago. This was a bit of an understatement from Kabuto. In truth, Orochimaru was furious that he had lost his next container and was forced into another body. Naruto, with the rest of the Rookie 9 and Guy's team, had managed to find out where Sasuke was and get to him. He didn't go without a fight, but when he was returned to Konoha, Tsunade and a seal specialist from Hidden Sand had figured a way to remove his curse seal, returning him to his old broody self. Footsteps were heard coming down the hall to the room Naruto was located in. He prayed that it wasn't Orochimaru coming, but they went unanswered as the legendary snake Sannin and traitor to Konoha entered the room with evil smile on his face looking at Naruto. "You have cost me a lot, dear boy," Orochimaru spoke as he neared the table Naruto was shackled to. "And I intend to get my worth out of you." His long tongue licked his lips. "What are you going to do?" Naruto spoke determined, but there was a slight bit of fear behind his voice. "Ku. After I am finished with you, you will be calling me master and you will be my new pet." Orochimaru leaned in front of Naruto. Naruto spit in disgust into Orochimaru's face. "I will never serve someone like you. That's a promise." A needle was injected into Naruto's skin, making him slightly dizzy. His senses were out of whack as he couldn't seem to hear anything and could barely see straight. He only barely realized his shirt was ripped off of him and that Orochimaru was staring at his seal, while Kabuto was next to Naruto's head. The two going through hand seals Naruto could barely see them all. Naruto had no idea what was going on, but Kyuubi did. "Oh shit!" Naruto's dizzy world immediately vanished. It turned into pain, unrelenting pain in the seal, his body, and in his mind. The world went black. XXXX. "Oh," she yelled. Hinata awoke with a start in a cold sweat and breathing heavily. She had seen a horrible nightmare of Naruto being captured by Orochimaru. It all ended quickly when she felt the pain that was delivered to Naruto. Slowly Hinata started to take in her surroundings. The hospital? She thought after she noticed the room she was inside of. Slowly everything started to come back to her and the fight that her and Naruto had fought against elite sound ninjas. Both of them were at the brink of chakra exhaustion before the fight even started from training with each other. They had never imagined that the sound nins would be able to sneak that far in and surprise them. Nevertheless, the battle was long and hard fought, but they had left her unconscious and taken Naruto. Tsunade burst through the hospital door. She had run as fast as she could after hearing Hinata awake with a scream and was the first person to make it. "Hinata, what happened?" Hinata started crying and buried her head into her hands. Tsunade was next to her in an instant, trying to comfort her as other people she knew came into the room from the waiting area. After about 2 minutes, she had calmed down enough to speak again. "Hinata, what happened? Where is Naruto?" Tsunade asked again calmly. "They took him," Hinata said with slow tears making their way down her cheeks. "Who?" Tsunade needed to know who exactly got Naruto with all of his enemies. "Orochimaru has him," she spoke slowly. Everyone in the room gasped at that news. It was hard to believe that something like that could happen to Naruto, but they knew how big of grudge was now held against Naruto for freeing Sasuke. "Get me Uchiha Sasuke," Tsunade roared. Hai Shizune spoke before she puffed out of the room. Hinata, Tsunade spoke as she spun around to face the girl. "Tell me everything." So that's what she did. She told them about the training they were doing when they were attacked and even told Tsunade about the dream. Tsunade was really praying that what Hinata had seen wasn't a vision, but she knew it was too detailed not to be true. Their conversation ended when Sasuke burst into the room. "What happened to Naruto?" he yelled as he entered. The situation and the dream was explained once again now to the Uchiha boy, who seemed to pale every time a word was spoken. His legs buckled beneath him and he leaned his back against the wall. "Sasuke, what's wrong? Do you know where Naruto is?" This time Sakura spoke. Yeah, I do." Sasuke looked up into Tsunade's eyes. "The place she described is a one-of-kind place for Orochimaru." "What do you mean?" she questioned. It's his experimentation lab. It's where he makes his monstrosities," Sasuke finished. Tsunade was now wide-eyed at the prospect of Naruto being changed to Orochimaru's will. How long will it take to reach? It wasn't so much a question as it was a demand. About 2 weeks our fastest speed. He wanted it far from Konoha, so that it would never be found. Sasuke spoke as he got up and headed for the door. Where are you going? Kiba asked from next to Hinata's bed. Sasuke spun around with a look of determination in his eyes. Same place you all should be going. Go get you stuff together and grab your teammates, we leave in 15 minutes. Meet me at the gate. Every ninja in the room immediately vanished to get their respective team and items needed. 15 minutes later they stood at the main gate. All of the Rookie 9 with Guy's team and their senseis, along with Jiraiya, headed out the gate, leaving Tsunade to wish she could just drop the job of being Hokage and go with them. Kabuto looked on at the body in the cell. It was completely exhausted and sleeping in a dark corner with a metal shackle around his neck keeping him connected to the wall. Slowly the figure seemed to awaken. He isn't even human anymore, Kabuto thought. 2 blue slitted eyes opened and met with Kabuto's. Instantly an instinctual fear was in the eyes as it backed into the dark corner of the cell he was now in. Kabuto only looked on humorously. Where am I? It slowly spoke to him from the darkness of its hiding spot. Kabuto remained silent. Who are you? It asked. Kabuto again remained silent. The eyes took on a confused expression and darted around in different directions as if looking for a sign. Finally, it had one more question to ask. Who am I? It asked. Kabuto chuckled a little and walked away from the cell. The way he held himself as he walked down the rows of cells stated one thing to everyone watching him. Kabuto was not pleased. Actually, that was understatement. Kabuto was pissed. This is your fault, Kabuto. You know better than to disappoint me. The words Orochimaru spoke to him were still fresh in his head, no matter how many days ago they were stated. He had yet to be punished, but he knew it would be far from pleasant when it came to Orochimaru. He knew that he had done the amnesia jutsu perfectly, and the loss of memory proved it, but it wasn't as simple as that. He glanced back behind him at the body he was dragging by a chain. The chain connected to the collar of the body was allowing him to drag the bloody body back towards its cell. It was breathing erratically, likely from loss of air due to the collar being pulled like it was. The fact that the creature was too tired, starved, and sore was preventing it from trying to walk upright or adjust itself for easier breathing. Instead, he just let himself be dragged across the hard, and sometimes sharp cobblestones that floored the prison he was in. Blood was smeared across the floor he had been dragged across. While Kabuto took pleasure in the suffering of his latest patient, it was already growing tedious after 2 days. He had been at it for 2 days and had no results as of yet for his master. He had only one theory, but he knew his master wouldn't like it. If that was the case, he would be the one to suffer. The anger consuming him once again, Kabuto turned around quickly and marched to the body. Pulling back his leg, he launched a kick into its abdomen, launching it into one of the bars of another cell. Why won't you just submit, demon? He yelled as he kicked the body again. To his surprise, the head on the ground raised slowly and obviously with a great amount of effort to look Kabuto in the eyes. Spitting some blood onto the floor, it grinned a little. The sight of the blood leaking from his mouth and the stains on his gums and teeth were more than unnerving for Kabuto. He took a step back when the demon responded to him. Instinct was the only word it spoke. Kabuto, enraged at the answer given, kicked the demon in the head. The head snapped back into the cell bar he was lying against, knocking it unconscious and letting some blood leak from the back of his skull. His anger receding, Kabuto picked up the chain again and started the way back to the cell again. The answer was the exact one Kabuto had been thinking of the whole time. He knew what the demon was saying to be true. A demon would not serve a human, especially not ones as prideful as the Kitsune breed, even if it was only half Kitsune. Instincts. I will break them for Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto spoke quietly before he threw the unconscious Kitsune half-breed against the wall in the back of his cell. He quickly locked the cell and left, wanting to get started on plans for trying to break the demon tomorrow. In the cell, There she was. She was standing there looking directly at him. He considered her an angel. She stood there with a soft smile that seemed to hold an infinite amount of caring. She had creamy white skin that contrasted perfectly with her deep indigo hair. The hair went down in between her shoulder blades, as two bangs framed her face. Her eyes distinguished her the most to him. They had no pupils and were a light shade of lavender. The eyes seemed like read exactly what he was thinking. They could see directly into his soul, as if they could see directly into his soul. They drew him in. She had her arms outstretched towards him. She wanted him to come to her. He could tell she was saying something, but he couldn't hear it. All he could see was her lips moving as if trying to call out to him. He started to be able to hear the words. His eyes opened slowly as he looked around the cell he was in. Damn, he thought as he realized where was. He had been hoping to hear what the girl in his dreams had been saying. He just didn't understand why he would be dreaming about this girl, unless she was very important to him. The same dream had been repeating every time he was asleep or unconscious. Then again, he couldn't exactly say how long he has been dreaming about the girl, or if he even knew the girl for that matter, since he could only remember about 3 days. Yeah, 3 days of hell, he thought sarcastically about his whole situation. Flashback. To say he was confused would be a bit of an understatement at the moment. To be completely honest, he had no idea what the hell was going on. He couldn't remember anything, and the harder he tried, the more painful a headache he started to feel in the back of his skull. All he knew was that he was here in a cage, with a large metal collar attached to his neck that was in place attached to a chain in the wall, effectively keeping him from moving too much. He looked up and saw a man with white hair and glasses looking directly at him. To be honest, he was a little afraid of the man. He was chained up, apparently at his will, and was just looking at him eerily. Knowing the only way to figure things out would be to ask some questions, he began. Where am I? He asked. No response. He just stood there looking at him. Who are you? At this moment, even though there was no response, he realized something very important about what was happening. Who the hell am I? He thought. This was something that he should know, right? How could he not know his own name? Who am I? He asked, uncertain if he would get an answer, but hoping maybe the man would know. To his surprise, the man just chuckled and walked away. Well, that was pleasant. Asshole. He let out a large sigh and thought some more about his predicament. How did I get here? This just doesn't make any sense. How was I caught? He was brought out of his thoughts when a long distance away, he could hear 2 pairs of footsteps coming from down the hall. He could also hear them talking, though it was a great distance. So he is unaware of who he is? He couldn't recognize the voice, but something about him brought both a chill and sense of hatred to him. He couldn't understand it. Hi, Orochimaru-sama. It seems everything was a complete success. This voice seemed to match that of the man that chuckled at him a little while ago. He must have gone to get the other man. Kukuku. I wonder how Konoha will like him being used against them like this. Konoha? What the hell is Konoha? He thought to himself after this statement. Then he came to another startling realization. His fear of the situation changed and he became increasingly angry as an instinct seemed to kick in. Use me. They want to use me. But he also said used against them. Does that mean I was a tool for this Konoha? Kabuto and Orochimaru came directly into view and looked into the cage. They could see the Kitsune boy with his back against the wall and his head looking down. His face was covered in shadows, but the way he was flexing his hands showed he was likely awake. I see you are up. Looking up, he saw the man for the first time. He had long, greasy-looking black hair. His skin was pale and sickly-looking, but the thing that stood out the most was his eyes. They looked like that of a snake. This was Orochimaru. Who am I? His expression didn't change at all as he asked the question to the person standing outside the cell. Kukuku. I am your new master and you will help me in my goals. Orochimaru responded. The boy in the cell once again looked down towards the ground, apparently disappointed in the answer he received. You didn't answer my question. Orochimaru smirked a little bit at this. You are my pet. The head shot up with fury behind red-slitted eyes. He looked menacingly at Orochimaru. Since he couldn't exactly get through the bars, or even close to them with the chain he was attached to, he settled with spitting directly into the face of the man from several feet away. His chakra flared and a red aura was whipping all around him in random directions. His instincts had kicked in. He had too much honor, respect, and pride to do something such as that. There was no way in hell he would ever be considered a pet to anyone. How could someone ever consider someone like him a pet? There was also a feeling that told him that he would never serve this man. Let's get one thing straight, you disgusting snake. I will never be considered a pet to anyone. I am the only ruler of myself. And while I may not remember much, something is telling me deep inside that I will never serve you. He growled out. Slowly, exhaustion seemed to be coming back to meet him for a second visit. Orochimaru watched in anger as the youth's eyes returned to their original color, and he slowly fell to his side asleep. After he had woken up again, he really wished he hadn't. He was no longer in his dark, little, damp cell. No, now he was in a very large room, apparently hanging in mid-air. Chains attached to different parts of his body kept him suspended. In front of him seemed to be a throne. On that throne sat Orochimaru, looking at him menacingly. Kabuto was standing to the side of the throne. There was a small table with a number of different medical instruments. He was brought out of his observing when Orochimaru spoke. You have said you will not be my pet. He spoke with venom at the now suspended youth. He watched as the eyes flashed red for a second and an angry glare was sent his way. He only smirked. So I have decided that you will either serve me or starve to death. Orochimaru got up off his throne and started to walk away. You haven't eaten in, I would say, 2.5 weeks considering the trip it took for them to get here. You should last a few more weeks. Orochimaru opened the door to exit. But before he did, he turned around and looked in the eyes of prisoner. But it will not be a pleasant few weeks. Before walking out, a soft chuckle caught his ears, turning his gaze from the man that just walked out of the room. Turning his head, he looked at Kabuto wheeling the table that had the different instruments on it into a path directly in front of him. He watched as Kabuto lazily pulled out a kunai from his pouch and started spinning it by the loophole on his finger. It seems that I get to have some fun. I have so been looking forward to this. Without warning, he threw the kunai into the suspended boy's left thigh. He winced at the pain, but didn't scream out. He was breathing hard at the pain in his leg, but he kept his eyes focused on Kabuto's. Kabuto slowly walked up to the kunai and pulled it out. I have so been interested in your healing abilities. He had an evil grin as he spoke. Healing abilities? Was the only thought that ran through the prisoner's head. Let's see. With that, Kabuto took the kunai and slashed it horizontally across the demon's chest. The cut wasn't deep, but blood was flowing steadily down his body from the wound. The pain was much worse than in the thigh. He almost let out a cry of pain, but he didn't want to do that in front of these bastards. Flashback end. That how it had been for the past couple days now. They hadn't fed him once and he was feeling the hunger. He hadn't noticed it when he first woke up, but it was haunting him now. He could practically feel his muscles start to eat away at themselves. It was maddening. Then the torture was getting worse. That is, if you could call it torture. Technically, torture was usually used to get information out of someone. This, however, was just pure pain and no questions. The only thing that would happen is to see if he would now serve the snake bastard. The first day started as just hits and cuts along his entire body. He didn't quite understand why, but his body was healing at a quick rate. It was as if something was constantly healing him, but he just didn't understand what it could possibly be. He knew it was keeping him alive, though. The pain and blood loss that he was going through was easily fatal to those of weaker stature. He seemed to be able to recover fairly quickly from yesterday's assault, but that just led him into this morning's assault. This morning he was once again awakened from his pleasant dream of the lavender-eyed girl and brought to the same chamber as before. He couldn't put up a struggle due to the weakness he was currently in, but he was sure to throw a few choice curse words directed at the mother of the bastards dragging him. When he was hung up, he was surprised to see Kabuto walk up to him with nothing in his hands. Instead, his hands started to glow and he started severing muscles inside the body. He had never felt such pain before, the pain of muscle just being simply cut to pieces by chakra. The pain was too much. He passed out a number of times, and instead of crying out in pain settled for just screaming insults at Kabuto, swearing revenge. Kabuto described the technique as a chakra scalpel. The cuts were fine and deep into his tissue, but he was careful not to cause anything fatal. The memory from what Kabuto had done sent a small shiver to his spine. He was beginning to wonder what he had done to deserve this. Was he maybe some kind of criminal? No, that wouldn't explain why they wanted to use him. Was he just some kind of weapon to be used to people's will? While he would admit his body seemed well trained, he just seemed to doubt in his heart that he was a cold-killing machine. No angel like that would be holding her arms out to a cold-killing machine. He thought of the girl in his dreams. He desperately wanted to find out who she was and knew he would do anything to find her. But he was starting to get worried about surviving that long. He knew that without food he wouldn't last a few more weeks, and every day was promised to be worse than the before. He would need to try and do something before he got too weak, but he knew that he had to wait for just the right moment to do anything. He could tell the two that were attacking him were strong, he could sense their strength, but he knew that he was strong also. I will get out of here and I will find her. I swear it. After that thought, he did the one thing that seemed to be able to comfort him. He fell asleep into the world that girl he wanted to meet so much was. Hinata. It had only been 3 days since they had taken off. She was packing quickly to leave the camp this morning. She didn't want to stop at all last night, but as Sasuke had stated, we will need to be in top shape if we want to rescue him. So we will need to rest some. They hadn't stopped the day before that, but she still didn't want to stop now. Her only thought was in getting to Naruto. That wasn't the only thing that was troubling her though. Every time she had been sleeping she was having them. She was having visions, though she would classify them as nightmares. She was watching every instance through the eyes of her crush. It was horrible. Every time she fell asleep she saw it. He would be hanging in the air and the man she knew as Kabuto would just attack him. It was getting worse every minute as she watched. Kabuto's anger would just rise at her crush, and he would start hurting him more and more. If he was sleeping when she would enter his own sleep, then the only vision she would see is of a fox. The fox seemed to be skittish at the situation it was in. The fox would be in a corner chained. When a snake came and offered it freedom in exchange for becoming loyal to snake, the fox was afraid, but its pride would never allow it to submit to servitude. Hinata had no idea what the dream meant, but she had a small idea. She thought that it was some omen about the Kyuubi. She had known about the Kyuubi longer than anyone else in Naruto's group of friends. She considered it a gift from heaven the day he told her first before anyone else. She told him that he was himself, not a demon. She was slightly taken aback at first, but she knew what he said was true. Naruto, with all his quirks and flaws, was no demon. That didn't keep her from starting to hate many people from her own village. Every person she saw after the confession that glared at Naruto she kept a mental note on for the future. She would not enter restaurants, shop at certain stores, or even talk to certain people anymore because of their attitude towards him. This of course caused a great deal of shock when the Hyuga heir herself started to refuse service from certain stores. While it did open some eyes to how they should treat the boy, some just thought that she was foolish for what she was doing. But it wasn't fair for them to judge him as the demon fox. It just wasn't true. If people would take the time to get to know him like she did, then there would be no issues at all. Some would rather see him dead than in their own village. And here she was trying desperately to save his life. Packing the last of her things, she walked over to the spot she in the center of the camp, waiting for the rest to finish before they could leave. One by one they all showed up. Finally Sasuke spoke. Okay, our speed cut down about a day and a half so far. We can keep this up, but I personally want to go faster. If you can't keep up, inform me so I can slow down. Ready? A loud HAI was heard from everyone present. They all vanished in a blur, racing towards the location of the one they desperately wanted to rescue. Yakushi Kabuto was a brave man. In fact, he was only scared of one person in the world. The man he bowed down to had instilled fear in him that none could even begin to comprehend. And even though he served Orochimaru faithfully, he was never awarded any praise from his master. He knew he was being used, but what could he do about it? He knew Orochimaru's strength, he knew what the man was capable of, and while this might seem like the most dangerous person for him to be around, he also knew that in the future that being the right-hand man of the most powerful man in the world would have its benefits. While he might be disrespected now by Orochimaru, he was feared and followed by all of those ranked lower than him, and it would be the same thing once they succeeding in destroying Konoha. The only difference would be that it would be the world bowing before him and his master, not just some sound shinobi. His strength was unquestioned amongst the ranks of sound. He could match up with the legendary copy Nin Kakashi, fought against the likes of the legendary Sannin, and was powerful enough to be considered number 2 amongst the ranks of the sound. He had never backed down from any challenge given to him, whether preparing a feast of innocent people for Manda, experimenting with bodies to make the ultimate tool, or even doing missions that were considered suicide. But for all of his bravery and courage, it was all sapped away by the look being given to him by the young man hanging in the air just in front of him. Kabuto knew he had nothing to fear. An iron shackle was holding each limb stretched away from his body, the body suspended in air like a rag doll. He had been tortured for almost 2 weeks now and not had food in almost double that amount of time. He was a medic that rivaled that of Tsunade. He knew the body just couldn't take the amount of punishment it was being given. Observing his deeds on the body, he could help but be in a little bit of awe at his stubbornness. His thigh had holes in it which were quickly healing up, from where he had driven screws into the leg. His left arm was broken. A smart-ass remark had earned him that one. Bruises and cuts were all over his body. When stress started to get to him, the boy made an excellent punching bag. But he was still deathly afraid for the first time in a long time. He could barely see them. The boy's head was downcast, the shadows covering his eyes. But he could still them. Red eyes were shining through the shadows. Red that was dark and crimson as the blood that slowly dripped off the body in a small puddle on the ground. The killing intent was the most he had ever felt, almost enough to cause him to want to end his own life just to get away. "What did you say?" It wasn't a question, it was a demand. A simple and incredibly difficult question to answer at the same time. He knew the answer, he knew what he said, but should he possibly invoke the wrath of this man? Or should he feign ignorance, further risking his wrath and hope for the best? He needed to gain his cool, he needed to calm down and answer. He took several deep breaths to relax, but he could still feel those bloodthirsty eyes on himself. "I said, I wonder if that bitch you were with survived." He spoke as calmly as he could. He originally spoke it to see if he would get some reaction to the girl. He had noticed them both being together when they first attacked to capture him. He might have been able to infuriate the boy, but he had never expected this, and was instantly regretting what he had said. "Tell me what she looked like." Those damn eyes. They never blinked. Not even once in the long minutes he had been staring into them. They bore into his soul, making him fear for his life. She? Damn, a stutter, that was something he never did. How the hell could he show his fear? Had dark blue hair and pupil-less eyes. Why'd I think? But I did. Lavender. What? Her eyes are lavender. It stated it as if it was something that he should have known. That it was a direct insult to his very being that he didn't know the color of her eyes. He remembers the Hyuga girl? Kabuto thought instantly. Is he slowly regaining his memory? You remember her? Only in dreams, insect. Kabuto slightly smirked, feeling better than he had a few moments ago. Now he had something on the fox demon. Something to use as an advantage. I wonder if she did survive. When we left her, she was on the brink of death. Hinata, I believe her name was. He smirked as red eyes disappeared beneath hair as the head lowered to look directly at the floor. He was right. This was the leverage he needed for the mental torture he would put him through. His last few days alive would be worse than before. Breaking the mind was so much more fun after all. Kabuto's eyes widened when the eyes looked back at him again. The killing intent that had all but vanished from before multiplied beyond before. The red eyes stared directly at him with wide angered eyes. He felt his knees begin to feel weak, like they would buckle under his legs at any moments if he didn't get away from this. I swear. At this he cocked his head to the side a little bit. The face was still covered mostly in shadow, but he could now make out a sinister grin along with the red eyes still in the shadow. That before I leave this place, dying or escaping, that I will kill you for what you have done. Kabuto collapsed to his knees. He knew demon oaths. They would go through them no matter what. It was their code. Now Kabuto was marked by this demon in front of him to die. Kabuto was happy to see the red eyes widen with surprise and blood trickle out of the mouth. The blonde was looking down at his stomach in surprise. Kabuto could see something sticking out of the boy's gut. Leaning his body around to look behind the prisoner, he let out a breath of relief he hadn't realized he was holding when he saw Orochimaru there with the legendary sword Kusanagi sticking through the demon. Orochimaru was breathing a little heavy and was sweating a little. The massive killing intent apparently having affected even him. Orochimaru withdrew the blade and slammed the hilt into the back of the blonde's head. The killing aura died immediately when he went unconscious. Take him to the throne room side cell and keep him there. Then come back to me. He commanded immediately and walked off still breathing hard. Kabuto took a few moments to compose his nerves, but didn't want to wait too long, lest the prisoner reawake. In his mind he questioned why Orochimaru would want to stick him in the cell directly connected to the throne room through a wall, but thought nothing of it. He deposited the body in the cell and locked the door. He quickly made his way to the throne room to see Orochimaru sitting on the throne. We will have guests shortly. Kabuto's eyes widened in surprise. Konoha found us this fast. Of course Sasuke. Then why, if I may ask Orochimaru-sama, are we still here? Orochimaru let loose a smile so sinister it almost matched the one he had seen not too long ago. I want them to see what has become of their next Hokage. Hinata. Hinata. She tried to keep asleep. She needed to know what was happening to him. She had to share his pain. Hinata, wake up. She was being shaken at the shoulders now. She knew there would be no going back to sleep now. Slowly she opened her eyes. It was blurry to her. Quickly she wiped away the tears she had in her eyes to get a better view. Kneeling next to her was Kurenai. Hinata, come with me. Hinata nodded wordlessly and got out of her sleeping bag. After quickly changing clothes, she left the tent and headed for the direction Kurenai left in. Sitting in a small clearing with a small fire going were all the senseis of the teams and Jiraiya. Sit down, Hinata. Kurenai spoke with a small smile to the nervous girl, clearly wanting to calm her nerves. Hinata calmly walked over to the fire and sat down in the circle. All the jounin watching her. Hinata, you've been crying every night in your sleep since we've left. Hinata's eyes widened a little bit at this. You have also been talking in your sleep some. Well, not really talking as much as crying out in pain. Hinata looked straight down at the ground, tears starting to well at her eyes again. She took a moment to gather her thoughts. I see through him in my dreams. I see what they are doing to him. She looked up in tears at the surprised faces of all the sensei. They're killing him, she yelled out. In all the times I have seen in my dreams, not once has he been given any sort of food. They are starving him to death, giving him only water to make sure he dies from the longer pains of hunger. His time conscious is spent only being tortured for their sick fun. He's been cut, hit, stabbed, electrocuted, and too many other things to list. When he is sleeping, I see a dream of a snake offering something to a fox in a corner, but the fox refuses on his pride. Everyone looked at her in surprise. They were expecting her to have some nightmares about Naruto, but they weren't expecting her to be seeing through him at all the events happening. It honestly shocked most of them that her bond with the boy could be so deep when they weren't even dating. She had the bond of a wife to husband. I don't know what just happened when you woke me." Her breathing was ragged as she spoke. She was having great difficulty trying to express what she had seen. Kabuto was looking at him like a scared child, but he just kept his level gaze. Then he felt something. He looked down, and sticking out of his stomach from behind was Kusanagi. The teachers looked stunned. If what she was saying was true, then Naruto will have been without food for almost 4 weeks. He needed food in the next couple days or he would die. Luckily, they were only 1 more day away. There would be no rest now, and they were leaving now. "Get everyone up, we are going now," Kakashi stated with fierce authority. There she was again, a younger her, but it was still her. He couldn't help but be incredibly angry at the situation in front of him. He watched her trying her hardest, giving off blow after blow, but she was still getting hurt badly. He could only see the back of the one attacking her, but he had long black hair in a ponytail. Bandages were wrapped around his arm and he had tan clothing on. He still could not see his face. He watched as she coughed out blood onto the floor. Then she said something to infuriate her opponent. The opponent was caught by a number of people. One with spiky gray hair that stuck off to one side and a forehead protector was over his right eye. Another was woman with long black hair and red eyes. There was also a man with spiky brown hair and a beard smoking a cigarette. Then there was a man in green suit with the shiniest teeth he had ever seen. But he could only watch as she fell to the floor, seemingly lifeless onto her back. He jumped down to her as the medics carried her away. As he watched her walk away, he turned around and saw the face of the man that had done this to her. He would remember that face, those white eyes. He woke up with a start. This was the first different dream he had. It angered him so much to see that girl getting beaten like she was. He was serious as his eyes flicked from blue to red. He tried to move around, but a sharp pain in his left arm had him thinking against that. There was also a pain in his stomach. He looked at his left arm to see quite plainly that it was broken. He saw that he had been stabbed through in his stomach. Looked like it didn't hit any vital organs luckily, but it still hurt like bitch. The pain in his mind still reeling from the earlier events, but he had one thing to smile about. "Hinata," he smiled as he said it. The bastard Kabuto had let the name slip in his conversation. He now knew the name of the girl in his dreams, maybe which would explain the different dream now. The dream angered him beyond reason. The boy in the dream that beat her to the brink of death. And judging by the way they looked, they were family. And while he couldn't remember much, he still knew family was something that was supposed to be treasure. Looking around, he noticed that he was in a different cell than he was in before. He also noticed that he wasn't chained to the wall this time. Apparently Kabuto had been in too much of a rush or just too frightened to remember. He walked around the room observing where he was. It felt good to finally be able to stretch his legs and walk around some, but he still felt weak while he was doing. His stomach growled loudly in protest to the extra work his body was doing with the nutrients required to do so. Suddenly his ears picked up on something. He walked over to the wall and tried to listen to the conversation on the other side. He was getting close to hearing what was said when the wall itself started to open up. "Hinata!" They ran as silently as they could through the dark hallways. Candles placed on the sides of the walls hardly providing any real source of light along the dark hallway. They had finally made it to the lair, easily dispatching the guards outside and the few they had encountered inside. It seemed that this place was absolutely secret, so few guards were kept. Kiba suddenly stopped at the front of the group. He knelt down to the ground and touched something on the ground. Everyone looked over his shoulder and gasped in surprise to see it was smears of blood from a body being dragged across the ground. Kiba sniffed at the blood some. "It's Naruto's, but it smells a little off." He paused for a moment and then shook off the chilling feeling he was having. "This way, everyone." He took off into a sprint again, everyone close on his heels. They ran along the hallways until they finally came to a large double door. Pushing on it, they found it to be locked. "Everyone back." Jiraiya yelled out as swirling ball of blue chakra gathered in his hand. Rasengan! As he charged the door, blowing it into pieces and effectively covering the small area in a dust cloud. The entire group ran inside. Suddenly everyone froze on the ground. No one could move. Looking down, they saw the dust from the explosion had covered a seal that they couldn't see on the ground. They were all trapped. Ku. It seems you have led them here, Sasuke-kun. Everyone looked up to see Orochimaru sitting on his throne, leaning back with his head leaning on his upright fist. The snake Sannin seemed to have a small bead of sweat forming on his forehead. He is supplying chakra to the seal, he has to focus to keep it going. Jiraiya thought. Where is Naruto bastard? Sasuke yelled out while sending a death glare straight at him. That's no way to treat your old master, Sasuke-kun, spoke Kabuto as he stepped out from behind a pillar near the wall to their right. Kakashi scowled directly at Kabuto. The two of them still had a score to settle. Shut up, Sasuke yelled again. Oh, Orochimaru-sama, they tried so hard to get here. Shouldn't we at least show him to them? The snake grinned sinisterly as he nodded his head in agreement with Kabuto. Reveling in the feeling of showing them the changed form of the chained-up boy they had come to hope rescue, he walked over to a panel in the wall. He quickly pulled down the lever and turned around to watch the faces of the Konoha Nins as the wall behind him opened up. As soon as the door opened up, Kabuto felt something and heard something. He heard the sound of flesh being ripped apart. Looking down at where he had a funny feeling, his eyes widened in shock to see a bloody clawed right hand sticking through his chest where his heart should be. I always carry out my promises, he heard said behind him before Kabuto felt life slip from his grasp. They knew things were bad when they found out they had all walked into a trap, but now they were terrified. When Kabuto and Orochimaru were talking about showing something to them, they narrowed their eyes in anticipation. However, their eyes immediately went wide from shock when a spray of blood went across the floor as an arm tore its way into the body of Kabuto. Kakashi stood shocked. He knew Kabuto was strong, but he was also arrogant, a weakness that often plagued those with power. He still, though, never imagined that he would see Kabuto die so suddenly and without warning in front of him. It was a blessing and a curse. Now Kabuto was out of the picture, but still, what had done this to him? They couldn't quite see anything behind Kabuto's body. They could feel it, though. An ever-growing killer intent was starting to flood the room. It was almost suffocating, but it was all directed at one person. They looked towards Orochimaru to see his face contorted in a mixture of anger and surprise. This was obviously not in their plans. They gasped a little bit when the hand pulled back out of the body and Kabuto's lifeless corpse collapsed onto the floor. They couldn't make anything out in the shadows of the cage except for two crimson-colored eyes filled with hate. It wasn't looking towards them, but straight at Orochimaru. Naruto. He was surprised when the wall in front of him started to open up. While he was enjoying the feeling of walking around for the first time in weeks, the sight on the other side of the wall pleased him even more. There was the one he had promised to kill, the one who had likely killed her, with his unprotected back to him. His eyes flickered in color. Gone were the blue eyes that didn't even realize he had, replaced by those crimson-colored eyes. This was the chance he had been waiting for. The anger in him that had been built up over the past weeks was ready to come out. He pulled his right arm back and shot it forward into the chest. His sharp claw like nails making quick work of the flesh and bone meant to protect his body. Blood sprayed out of the newly made hole onto his face and over the floor. He was covered in the blood of his victim, but it didn't matter, he had his prize. I always keep my promises. Naruto spoke to him. He pulled his arm out of the new hole in Kabuto's body and let the corpse fall to the floor. His senses knew where to look. He knew what he wanted. He saw his next target standing there looking towards him with hate and surprise in his eyes. The bloodlust was rushing into him. The need for revenge for how they had treated him, for what they did to him, and for what they did to her. His gaze was solely on one thing. That snake bastard was just on the other side of the room. He could tell that he was strong. Just from looking at him and sensing him, he could tell that Orochimaru had huge strength. That and that he was incredibly pissed to have just lost the young boy with glasses that was torturing him ruthlessly for the past weeks. He knew his left arm had healed some, but was still mostly broken. But hell, Naruto didn't care one bit. Only one thing was on his mind: revenge. He sprinted forward, ignoring the sounds that were like gasps coming from another part of the room. He would deal with anything else he had to later. His vision tunneled as he focused on the only other person he considered noteworthy in the room at the moment. His left arm hung limply at his side as he ran. Only his right hand was in front of him. The eyes of the snake widened in surprise at his speed. He could only grin as he got closer and closer, the need for revenge far outweighing the strain on his already weakened body. 10 feet away, he leapt up into the air and pulled his arm back to rip out the throat of the snake. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes as Naruto flew in the air towards him. Using the opportunity, the snake moved to the left to avoid the blow. Not quickly enough, the blow landed on his right shoulder instead of his throat. The claws dug in, trying to get a grip on the flesh and eventually the bone. Then he would rip it out. Orochimaru's left hand shot up and gripped him around the throat, choking the life out of him. For every squeeze Naruto did on his shoulder, Orochimaru would squeeze his throat. This continuous battle lasted only a few seconds as Orochimaru, using most of his strength, managed to choke him to the point of releasing the grip. Orochimaru looked around the room, greatly confusing his choking victim as to why he would lose focus, before Orochimaru looked into his eyes, glaring. "We will finish this another time, demon." He spoke quickly and threw Naruto across the room into a pillar with a sickening thud. He retreated quickly to the wall on the other side of the room. Naruto felt himself weakening. He almost lost consciousness when his head collided with the stone pillar he was against now. He looked around slowly for Orochimaru until he managed to spot him. Slowly he got onto his feet and made his way across the floor. Orochimaru smirked as he pressed a panel. A stone door opened up behind him and he quickly went in and shut it, leaving Naruto outside hitting it furiously. "Get back here, coward. I'll kill you for what you've done." He continued to beat on the door, letting out the occasional growl or roar. But slowly he was losing his rage against the door, seeing as it wouldn't even budge. He could feel the strain on his body, wanting him to just rest for a while, but he wasn't sure he would be able to get back up. Might as well try to escape now. Turning around, he was shocked at the sight of over a dozen ninja in front of him. Hinata! Hinata stood in shock at what was in front of her. Everyone around them gasped when the red-eyed creature leapt out of the shadows and charged at Orochimaru. She had only heard of them in legend, half-demons. That's what it was in front of her. A kitsune. As he ran at Orochimaru, she managed to see his features. 2 golden fox ears rested on top of a mop of dirt and blood-stained blonde hair. Red slit eyes like that of a fox along with his fangs, and 5 golden blood-stained tails whipped behind him as he sprinted his way towards the snake Sannin. She noticed one arm hung limp on his side, while the other held more like a claw than any form of taijutsu that she knew of. But none of that was what shocked her. Everyone else focused on the retreating form of Orochimaru after he threw the kitsune into the stone pillar. She winced when she heard the thud of the head hitting the pillar and knew he was likely unconscious. Groggily, he looked up and around the room. What shocked her were the blue eyes she knew and loved looking around before they suddenly changed back to that crimson red. Naruto-kun. Her eyes were wide and filled with tears looking at him. She knew that he hated being called the Kyuubi himself, even though he had formed a relationship with the demon. It was something that had always haunted him. But now Orochimaru had turned him into the thing that she knew would make him hated. His injuries also frightened her. He was badly hurt. She didn't need to be a medic nin to realize it. He stood there beating on the door that Orochimaru escaped through for a minute. Subconsciously, she stepped forward with her arm raised, simply wanting to get to him and help him. This obviously snapped everyone else out of their trance when they realized they could move. Immediately, she was pushed to the back of the group by Neji and Kiba as they got in front of her and into a ready stance, not realizing who it was they were up against in their fear and worry. Naruto. Shit, he had more men. Naruto thought as he looked at the groups of ninja in front of him. All seemed to be in a ready stance to fight him, although they had a look of worry in their eyes. He stopped when he noticed the eyes of one in particular. White eyes. It's him. Where the rage had all but disappeared, it was not back with vengeance. Standing in front of him was the person from his dreams, the one that attacked Hinata. Of course he would work for the snake if he would harm someone as perfect as her. His eyes focused solely on him. He saw some of the weaker members of the group shudder under the killing intent now being directed at the pale-eyed young man. The pale-eyed young man himself was losing his nerve. He was sweating under the killing intent and breathing heavily. His eyes went wide when the focus directed solely onto him. What the hell did he do? He flinched back a little when Naruto raised his right hand up and pointed it at him. You're the one. What? Neji stuttered. If someone would have been calm enough, they might have pinched themselves when they heard Neji stutter. I saw you in my dream. You hurt her. The boy said something, but Naruto wasn't able to make it out in his building rage. He knew he didn't have much time left before his body completely collapsed. Looking around, he wouldn't be able to take them all on. But hell, for her he was going to at least get this one. For that you will die. He roared as he charged forward. The obviously frightened target back-pedaled a little before stopping finally and trying to regain control of his emotions. He succeeded in that and managed to slip into a fighting stance. When he was about halfway across the floor, he sensed movement coming from above and to his right. He saw a green blur heading right towards him in mid-air. Konoha Senpu! The green blur yelled as it slowed down in mid-air to put power behind the kick. Naruto ducked quickly as he could to avoid the leg that looked like it could lop of his head coming at him. Not wanting to waste the opportunity of a target vulnerable in mid-air, but not wanting to waste too much energy, he came up with the quickest plan he could. He raised his right elbow just as he passed under the leg and slammed it in between the man's legs. Needless to say, he went down quickly. Naruto continued his path towards his target. The pale-eyed boy's eyes widened in surprise when he saw the green man go down, but he quickly regained his composure in his stance. He saw them coming this time. 2 large tornadoes on both sides of his body coming straight at him. More annoyances were getting in his way. He had to get to him, damn it. As the 2 spinning tornadoes neared him, he jumped into the air towards one of them. Not caring about the damage done to his hand, he reached into the tornado as it passed under him and gripped the first thing he got his hands on. Using the momentum of the spin, he flipped and planted his feet on the ground. Summoning his strength, he tossed the stopped body in his hands at the other tornado. Smirking a bit when he saw the 2 bodies slam into a wall when one tried to catch the other. Slowly he turned back towards the white-eyed one and walked towards him. A slow walk quickly became an all-out sprint as weapons began flying towards him. Every kind of weapon imaginable, but he dodged them with the grace and agility of a fox, not a single one even nicking him. He was almost there when he felt the heat start. Far off to his side, a boy with black hair and red eyes breathed in deeply as he shot a wall of fire in between Naruto and the group, trying to block him off. Hell, it can't be too thick. And it's not like I plan on making it out, Naruto thought as he covered his face with his arm and ran straight through the wall of flames. He was pretty sure his arms hated him at this point. One had broken. The other one cut horribly in that tornado and now burned. Now there was no one in between them now. Everyone around him seemed to back away as he changed his stance even further, and though he couldn't see it, he could hear one of them struggling against the others. He was about to reach him when the boy smirked and started to rapidly spin. Naruto could sense the energy starting to seep out. From what he could tell, he was forming a wall of chakra getting stronger with each rotation. Still, though, Naruto didn't care, he just had to make it to him. And that was exactly what he did. His hand connected with thin wall of chakra that was starting to build up. If he hadn't hit it so early, he wasn't sure he could break, though. His clawed hand reached through the wall and grabbed the stunned man by the throat. The wall immediately collapsed and Naruto took off running with the boy still in his grasp. Making it to the wall, he slammed his prey into it as hard as he could with one arm and held him up in the air. Neji! he heard screamed behind him. But he didn't care, even if the name somehow nagged him at the back of his mind. The nagging could only be explained by Naruto wanting to remember the name of the person who hurt her. He could see small drops of blood starting to come out of where his fingernails were digging into the skin. He could hear the footsteps of people rushing to attack him. If any of them got too close, he would threaten to end Niji's life. He planned to kill him anyway, but he didn't want to snap the neck, he wanted it slow and painful. Make him suffer for what he did. To his surprise, he felt a hand on his left shoulder. He quickly turned his head to yell his threat, but his words caught in his throat. I will kill him, if. There was Hinata with her hand on his shoulder with tears in her eyes. She was all right and safe. She looked completely healthy. His heart soared as he saw her. Instantly forgetting Niji, he dropped him to the floor unceremoniously. But what was she doing with them? Was she on their side? Smelling the people around him told him all he needed to know. None of them smelled like Snake. He had attacked people he didn't even know. Who were they? What the hell is wrong with me? Hinata stood next to him. It was hard for her to break free of Kurenai's grip, but a couple of taps to the tenketsu on Kurenai's wrist was all she needed to be able to get out and over to Naruto and her cousin. He looked at Niji with absolute in his eyes, and it honestly scared her to know that he could hate someone. Naruto had always been so kind and caring to all around him. Never like this. But now, he was looking at her with something like fear and confusion in his eyes. He didn't seem to know exactly what was going on. She was relieved when the red in his eyes faded and they returned to their blue color. She could see the weariness in his eyes, and the way he was struggling to still stand after now relaxing. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked at the wounds he had on his body. His left arm was broken and twisted badly, while his right arm was badly bleeding and burned. There was blood running down his face from where his head cut open when he collided with the pillar. But there was dried blood all around him, along with bruises, burn marks, cuts. The obvious signs of starvation were there, since his muscles looked to be eating away at themselves. She had no idea how he was even able to fight like he did. The condition he was in was horrible. He had managed to avoid Guy and strike him between the legs, stopped Kiba's Gutsuga, dodged Tenten's weapons, ran through a wall of fire, and then managed to break through the Kiaten. All of that to strength in the condition he was in. What could cause him to need to get revenge that much? What girl did Niji hurt? He collapsed onto his knees where she managed to catch him and hold him. He rested his head on her shoulder as his arms hung limply on the ground dripping blood. I'm so glad you're safe. She heard him speak before he finally slipping unconscious. That's when she realized that the whole time he was talking about her. He was talking about the Chunin exam all those years ago. Hinata, get away. Hinata looked up and saw most of her friends preparing attacks. When Naruto whispered into her ear how happy he was that she was okay, she felt as if on air. Even in the condition that he was in, he worried about her. Still though, the now unconscious young Kitsune was now in her arms. It elicited a small blush from the Hyuga girl at being able to hold his body so close to hers. Hinata, get away! She heard Kiba yell. Hinata stared at her friends in shock. Did they not know what was going on? Who it was that she was holding so desperately onto? They stood there ready to attack the unconscious man in her arms. Kiba stood poised after standing back up from his collision with Akamaru. His nails extended some as he prepared to lash out the demon that had attacked them. Tenten had readied her weapons after successfully grabbing Niji and pulling the gasping Hyuga to safety, while her teammate Rock Lee had already dropped his weights after watching his sensei go down. Ino had kunais in both her hand as she was ready to defend against any attacks as Chuji stood next to her. She was about to yell at her friends for what they were doing. Challenge if they were even truly his friend. She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up in surprise to the eyes of Kakashi as he kneeled next to her. Don't worry, I'll take care of this. His eyes curved upward to show he was smiling at the girl. His face took on a sudden serious demeanor as he stood and walked in front of the group of Konoha nins. They gasped in surprise as they watched him slowly slip into a defensive stance facing towards them. "Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing?" Ino yelled out at the Jounin, who must have lost his mind. Two figures made their way next to him and took a similar stance next to Kakashi facing the group. Sakura had already put on her pair of fingerless gloves as she took her stance to the right of Kakashi. Sasuke stood there in relaxed stance, but with his Sharingan spinning to the left of Kakashi. "I will not allow one of my comrades to be harmed." Kakashi spoke simply. The others gasped in surprise as realization dawned upon them of who it was they just attacked. That's impossible. What happened to him?" Kiba started out. "He's a demon. He doesn't even have the same scent. It's just changed by the demon blood flowing through him now," Kakashi stated. His nose was as good if not better than Kiba's. One of the great advantages Kakashi always had with his summoned dogs. Kiba's eyes widened in realization as he could smell just a bare trace of Naruto's scent. "But how did you know it was him?" Tenten blurted out. She still hadn't lowered her weapons yet. After what he did to Niji, there was no way she was going to drop her guard now. When he looked at Hinata, his eyes turned back to their normal color. Sasuke answered. His Sharingan had caught the sight for barely a second when Naruto was looking into Hinata's. When he blew the wall of fire in between Niji and Naruto, he only hoped to stop his movements. He had never expected him to just jump through the wall. Why did he attack Niji? Tenten was still on edge. To their surprise, the answer actually came from behind the group defending Naruto. Not from Naruto himself or from Hinata. Jiraiya had laid Naruto on his back and was now observing Naruto with a sad look in his eyes as he looked the boy over. "It looks like Orochimaru fused him and Kyuubi together." A loud gasp came from some of the shinobi in the room. "He was likely just lost in the bloodlust," he concluded sadly. Everyone lost themselves in through at what Naruto had been through, and what was to come now. "Sakura-chan, I need your help." Sakura spun around quickly at Hinata's voice, seeing Hinata kneeling down next to Naruto and scanning all the wounds on his body. Sakura instantly sped the short distance over and kneeled across from Hinata. Her eyes widened as she scanned the damage over the kitsune. His arm had started to heal, however it was positioned wrong since it wasn't placed in a cast or some kind of splint. His quick healing was working against him in his arm. If it fully healed in the wrong position, it would lose most of its functionality. She looked into Hinata's eyes and saw Hinata nod back as they knew what needed to be done. There was a sickening crack as Sakura broke the bones in his arm again. Working quickly, she wrapped the arm up as best she could until they could get somewhere better to treat the wound. She continued to scan his wounds. His right arm was in awful shape. The wounds, however, were healing fairly quickly, but without the proper attention they would leave awful scarring on the tissue. Sakura left that job to Hinata. Sakura focused on the wound on Naruto's skull. With every pump of his heart, a little bit more blood escaped. Luckily, the cut hadn't been too deep or he could have suffered much worse. It was a mostly simple matter to heal the cut, but she had to be careful around the thin layer of skin that protected the skull. She didn't really have to do much as she noticed that he was mostly healing himself. Sakura looked up after finishing her work at the same time as Hinata. The group now stood in a circle around the half-demon and those healing him. They looked on sadly at the boy that had become the thing he was fighting to prove he wasn't his whole life. "What do you think, Jiraiya?" Kakashi spoke as he stood next to the legendary Sannin. Jiraiya just frowned as he continued looking at Naruto. Finally, he shook his head sadly and spoke. "I don't know honestly. Look at his stomach. It's completely gone now." Looking down, they all noticed that there was no longer the spiral seal that used to rest around the boy's navel. "We will have to get back to Konoha, so I can do more research." "How do you expect to do that?" Everyone turned in surprise to look at Shikamaru. "Look at him. It's not like we can walk him into Konoha. You know how they already feel about him. They will try to kill him before he even gets 10 feet inside." Everyone frowned in understanding at what Shikamaru said. It was true, there was no way they could just walk into Konoha with half-demon fox. "Regardless, I can't set his arm properly here. We need to take him somewhere to rest. Also, I need some food pills for now, Chuji. Chuji nodded as he pulled out a couple of the small pills from one of his pouches. After Sakura caught them, she put them in his mouth and slowly rubbed his neck to get him to follow. If she had some sort of force, she would have used it, but that would only be available in Konoha. For now, feeding him pills would keep him alive until he was awake. There should be a decent village a few hours from here on the way back to Konoha. We can stay there for a while till we manage to figure out a plan if we rent a room. Kurenai spoke up after thinking about the best possible option. She had stayed in the village once for a mission not too long ago. It was likely their best option at the moment. Wordlessly, the group set into motion as Kakashi picked up his student. They all left quickly out the same way they had entered. Hinata never stayed more than an arm's length away from Naruto at any given moment. Hinata! That had been 4 days ago. When they made it to the outskirts of the village, the group had split up. Hinata, Jiraiya, and Kakashi stayed with Naruto while the rest went into town to rent the rooms. The inn itself was 2 stories high. Using most of their money, they had to purchase all the rooms on the top floor for everyone in the group. It was good not only for room but also for their secrecy. Once all the blinds were closed, they sent a signal to Hinata and her group. As soon as they got it, they teleported in a puff of smoke inside the room. Once inside, they laid him on the bed as Sakura used whatever she could scrounge inside the village to set his arm. In the end, they bandaged him up fairly well, but there was still no way to feed him anything except for food pills until he woke up himself. Hinata had set herself a chair next to his bed and never left his side that night. To their surprise, when they woke up, his wounds seemed to be fully healed. The malnutrition was still there, but the bones had mended together and his cuts had fully healed. Jiraiya could only speculate that the fusion made the process of healing much quicker to him than it did before. It would likely be even quicker if he was focusing his demonic chakra into the wounds. Still, though, he had yet to wake up from his deep sleep. Hinata sat there watching him. She had barely left his side at all since they had arrived. Food was brought up to her by her teammates and she would only leave to shower and use the restroom. She herself would sleep in the only other bed in the room, not allowing anyone else to take up the spot. She wanted to be there when he woke up. She wanted to be there since she thought it would help him. She herself was in a state of turmoil, though. She had broken down several times at night while everyone was asleep. She cried for him while holding onto his hand, praying for him to wake up. She cried because she knew that he had become the thing the villagers hated him for. Cried because likely all his dreams were shattered now. And she cried because she didn't know what she could do for him. All she could do was give him her support. Am I really so useless? She had been a wreck and she knew it. Everyone had tried to get her out of the room, but she wouldn't listen to it. In truth, the event before had really scarred her feelings on her friends. How they could attack him so quickly without looking underneath to see the truth really hurt her trust in some of them. She only really trusted those that either helped her, or the ones that only observed, like Shino and Shikamaru. It probably wasn't healthy for her to just be sitting there like that observing him as he slept. She could smile, though, as she now could say that he was safe here. Safe with her, where she could protect him. She smiled softly as she watched his ears twitch while he himself was in a deep sleep. 4 of his large fluffy tails wrapped around him almost like a blanket as he slept, as the other tail rested under his head like a pillow. To most it would seem weird, but Naruto had always seemed a little like Fox, and on his peaceful face it looked the most relaxing thing in the world. His fox ears stood up most of the time, but would occasionally twitch in the wind. The only things that she considered more threatening on his body were his now longer and sharper nails and teeth. In all honesty, Hinata considered his new ears and tail the cutest thing in the world. So all in all, her views on him hadn't changed one bit. If anything, he had become even more handsome to her. She had already considered him very handsome. She personally thought that he looked like a younger version of the Yondaime. She even considered idea that he could be his son. If that was true, then he would even stand a chance of asking her father if they could date. Hinata blushed at the thought. The few weeks that they had been training together in the morning had been the best of Hinata's life. The first morning when he found her, she almost had a heart attack. But after that, things went great. Naruto seemed to enjoy being around her. She even thought she caught him staring at her or blushing at her a couple of times. After that, she decided she had an overactive imagination. She had hoped to be able to build her confidence while she trained with him. The day they were attacked, she hoped to ask him if he wanted to have lunch at Ichikaru with her. It would be one of the biggest risks she had ever taken, but if he accepted, even just as a friend, it would have been worth it. Her thoughts were interrupted when, after knocking on the door, Sakura entered the tiny room. "No change, I guess?" Sakura let out a large sigh and sat down on the other bed inside the room. The only people that had used the room were Hinata and Naruto. When she wasn't asleep, she would sit next to him. "Well, everyone else has already gone to sleep, and I am too. You should get some sleep yourself, Hinata. All this stress isn't good for you." Hinata didn't really want to go to sleep, but it was late and she was feeling exhausted. "If he wakes up, I am sure his loud mouth will get you up in a heartbeat sleeping in here." Sakura joked to help coax Hinata into sleeping. Deciding some sleep was a good idea, Hinata nodded and went to the bathroom to wash her face before she slept. When she came back into the room, Naruto was still sound asleep and Sakura had left the room. She took off her forehead protector and placed it in her pack for later. She plopped down on the covers and was instantly asleep. Naruto. He was small, only a child by the feel of it. He had been running for hours, it felt like, on his small body. Not once could he rest as he darted down the streets of the city he was inside of. That feeling was driving him, a feeling no child his age should ever have to feel. The fear of death.